Okay, folks. So I feel compelled to share this again in light of some more of recent reports talking about geomagnetic storms and solar flares and all of this stuff going on up there in the upper atmosphere. And then the auroras being visible, extending out even farther. We know from their own publications at heart, they brag about creating the auroras, okay, when they beam the ionosphere. So if we can logically deduce that when we see those auroras extending out, that they are doing activities with our ionosphere, beaming our ionosphere. And everybody thinks it's cool, which I mean, the visual, how can you deny that it's not cool looking when we see the auroras and stuff, right? We can't deny that. It is very cool looking. It's like fireworks and stuff, but we have got to consider the consequences and what it's doing to our environment. Okay. And I just think it's very curious to me that shortly after I captured this back in August of 2018, months later, Trump issues this executive order 13865 to coordinate national resilience to EMPs. Okay. And in this publication, this presidential document, it actually mentions something about critical functions and the EMP, and the high altitude EMP is a type of human made EMP that occurs when a nuclear device is detonated at approximately 40 kilometers or more above the surface of the Earth. And they talk about the geomagnetic disturbance, what they call a natural EMP, which is why I felt compelled to share this again, because in this publication, they talk a lot about national essential functions. And what did we hear all about throughout 2020? All of these essential jobs, essential functions, essential businesses. If you weren't essential, you weren't allowed to operate. In other words, if you didn't already have a deal in place with the government to suit a useful purpose for a pandemic, and you were just cut out of the loop. Okay. And I'm hearing more reports about EMPs and GMDs and all of that stuff now. And I don't think that it is a coincidence that shortly after I captured this line of energy coming into the valley, producing these sweeping vertical and horizontal beams in Tesla coils, that Trump issues that executive order. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think we were subjected to something here. Okay. Were we attacked? And they don't want to own up to the fact that they allowed our guard to go down and they allowed this to happen to test our systems? Or did we initiate this test to create this EMP scenario to test our systems? Because that's the only few options there are. Because is saying that this is a GMD and saying that this here, this event that I documented here, and this line of energy coming down was a natural occurrence. No, it wasn't. The sun was too high up in the sky. There was no way this came from the sun. This line of energy and this bubble of energy that came down and pressed down on us and subjected us to these energies was not natural. That was created. And whether we created it or another country created it and we were attacked or something, I don't believe it's just a coincidence that I capture this and I send in my report to all those different agencies. And then Trump issues this executive order to coordinate our resilience to EMPs. Just saying.
EO 13865 states an electromagnetic pulse, EMP, has the potential to disrupt, degrade, and damage technology and critical infrastructure systems. Human-made or naturally occurring EMPs can affect large geographic areas, disrupting elements critical to the nation's security and economic prosperity, and could adversely affect global commerce and stability. The federal government must foster sustainable, efficient, and cost-effective approaches to improving the nation's resilience to the effects of EMPs. Since the President signed EO 13865, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has worked to reduce risk from an EMP attack by seeking to develop a greater understanding of EMP effects on critical infrastructure, national critical functions, and national essential functions, and by taking key actions to address known EMP-related vulnerabilities to critical infrastructure. Our outreach and analysis are used to identify priorities for future security and mitigation efforts and to develop the case for private sector investment in technologies and capabilities that have a definable and traceable reduction of risk to the EMP threat. Based on this work, The department will advise the public and private sectors on the most effective mitigation investments, including, when appropriate, making recommendations to other federal departments and agencies. The risk from EMP is a national issue with the potential to have a significant effect on critical infrastructure. Reducing the risk is a long-term effort. DHS is committed to this effort and is working to evaluate the need for a program management office to provide steady, consistent leadership in both the public and private sector engagements. In accordance with EO 13865, the Department has identified initial critical infrastructure and associated functions that are at greatest risk from an EMP and is focusing efforts on the development and implementation of evidence-based and independently tested EMP protection and mitigation technologies and resilience best practices. Initial efforts within the Department, working across the federal interagency, have focused on risk management to both the energy and communications sectors. Sectors. The EO required prioritization of systems, networks, and assets related to the newly developed National Critical Functions, NCFs. The complexity of this task required the development of new models and concepts for prioritization. Development of these risk management concepts and models is ongoing. However, the models have matured to a point that enables prioritization of a limited set of systems, networks, and assets for EMP vulnerability assessments and mitigation efforts. While the development of these models took longer than initially envisioned, additional time was needed to validate the concepts and ensure the efficient application of resources to progress to subsequent tasks within the EO. One executive order on coordinating national resilience to electromagnetic pulses, March 26, 2019 www.whitehouse.gov/presidential-actions/executive-order-coordinating-national-resilience-electromagnetic-pulses.